Hi, everybody. I'm Erika Steinberg, and welcome to Around the Ladder, the podcast where we explore the unexpected paths of career journeys. Many of us are familiar with the phrase climbing the corporate ladder, but what about when your path doesn't follow a straight line? I love the idea of going around the ladder and really carving out a different kind of career path for yourself. My own journey definitely took this route. After 25 years as an employee, I realized I'm an entrepreneur. Who knew? And I'm not alone in this. The Around the Ladder podcast is an opportunity for me to talk to others about their journeys. And today I'm very happy to welcome Candice Miller. Candice has over 15 years of experience in banking, strategy, and the legal industry. In 2021, she founded Miller Strategic Advisory Group. It's a consulting firm specializing in fractional chief operating officer, chief strategy officer, and business development coaching services for professional service firms. Candice's trip around the ladder has taken her to banking, to accounting, tax services, finance, and then finally to the legal sector, which is how we met. During our first call, I totally geeked out about how Candice had created and managed the attorney oversight and legal administration departments for a major bank. Only somebody like me would get very excited about this and want to ask you a zillion questions about it. But she developed audit programs, due diligence reviews, and scorecards for law firms across all 50 states and US territories. In her words, she witnessed the good, the bad, and the ugly of law firm operations, management, and partner dynamics, which ignited her passion for the legal industry, something we share. Candice is also a dedicated mentor and leader in her community. Since 2017, she's been a youth mentor, a big, with big brothers and big sisters of Erie, Niagara, and the Southern Tier. She still serves as a board member, an ambassador's board member, and a member of the annual gala committee. And her commitment earned her the Big of the Year award in 2024. I don't know how you find the time for all of this. Candice, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here and to continue our conversation.
Thank you, Erica. What an honor.
Oh, thank you. The honor is mine. Are you kidding me? When I said, "Oh, I want to start a podcast," and reached out to people who I have met in my networking and people who I know and who I like, and so many people have said, "Yes, of course, I would love to be on it." I was like, "Really?"
Yeah,
So,
so exciting.
so the last time we spoke, as I said, I really did like totally go nuts over the work that you had done for one of this huge bank building out their audit program for law firms. And you described yourself. One of the things that I loved about it is that you described yourself as very young and naive when you were there, and they asked you to do it, and you were just like, sure. And the way you described it, it sounded like it was totally new, and you were still very much in the earlier part of your career. And
Yeah,
I loved how you just jumped into it. What was that like to jump into something that was just so new?
sure, Erica. Honestly, looking back, it was very wild. I think that's honestly the only way to truly describe it, right? It was not something that I had a background in, and I think the person had looked at my resume and they said, "Oh, you went to school for accounting. Do you know audit?" And I said, "Well, that was a section of my education." And they said, "Look, this is what we need. It's based on lots of regulatory impacts that are coming down the pike, and nobody's really done this before. Other banks are hiring massive auditing firms to do it for them. We don't have the budget. Can you do this?" And I was like, "Yeah,
Sure,
why not?
of course I
Right?
can.
Sure, I'll do it." And I thought, this could be a defining moment in my career, which it really was. And I think that when you get that opportunity to sink or swim, if you really have the guts to do it, it could change the course of your career, which, like I told, it really did. Had no idea that this job existed. They didn't talk about it in career day, right? So,
No.
so yeah, wild is honestly the way that I would describe it.
So do you think that if somebody came to you now at this point of your career and said, "Hey, can you do this? Something totally new," you almost had like the benefit of youth on your side to be like, "Sure,
Yeah,
of course I
yeah.
can."
Yeah, and I think that being young and naive, so to speak, right? You kind of are like, yeah, I can do anything. Yeah, at this point in my career, I don't know that I would probably say yes to an opportunity like that specifically. Because I think, with age comes wisdom in terms of vetting out your skill set and saying no to things that maybe don't fit in that. So I would say at this point, probably not.
Hard pass. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
you did say that it became a career defining moment for you, and I guess a career defining time in your life.
Yeah.
That ended up being your first introduction really to the world of law firms, right?
Yes, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that position did a couple different things for me. It put me on the bank's executive radar, right? Who is this person? They're kind of mitigating a ton of risk for us. And, in that position, I was able to steer us away from a few firms that then kind of ended up closing or headlines, things of that nature. So when any of those missteps, I would say, happened, and an executive would read a newspaper or see an article and then, would shoot an email over to my boss's boss. They'd be like, "Yep, we're on it. We're good. We're in the clear." So that's kind of when I said, career defining, those people then were like, who is this person?
Mhm.
Right. And so then within the bank itself, I was able to apply for them to help me with the cost of some of my MBA program, which they gladly did, which was incredible, right? So forever grateful for that opportunity. And then with that, they nominated me to be, it was part of an internal management program, which the bank itself was really, really good at developing talent that way.
Mhm.
So those were really opportunities that had I said no to that, I don't think that my career would have had the same outcome, right? Um, so yeah, so I mean that was really thankful for that piece of it. So and then I think I missed the entire next part of your question.
Oh, who can't even remember? Because
Yeah,
I'm already on
yeah,
to the next one. But
yeah,
so,
yeah.
well, if it comes back to us, it'll come back to us. We'll circle.
Perfect. Yeah.
You know, it's our conversation. We could do what we want. What I was thinking was, what did you, as you're describing this, like, what did you learn about yourself and what you're capable of in this process?
Yeah, so a ton, right, Erica? What I realized was that outside of, if somebody asked me to be, a surgeon, not in my skill set, right? But when you don't really know the playing field, but you feel that you have the grit, is what I call it a lot, to kind of figure it out. I think that was something that I had never taken that type of risk on myself, right? I'd never taken a chance, had never really had that opportunity. I think when I started in this position, I think I was maybe 25, 26 years old, so very young, right? A baby. And having the opportunity to kind of take that risk in your career and say, okay, um, I can now do this. I think I found ways to work a problem differently, right?
Mhm.
So a lot of times with the position, and building on an audit program, you're building it based on regulations, and regulations generally have good intent, but sometimes the way that they're written, you don't really know how to comply with them, right?
Yeah.
And so you just have to figure it out and do the best that you can with the tools at hand. And a lot of times, what was happening is we were building out the program, the framework, and yes, we believe that this complies. We have legal signing off on it. And then another regulation comes out, and you're like, oh my gosh. So, so I think it's being able to work a problem and coming at it from different angles, right? And then also not allowing those obstacles where it may seem like you're up against a brick wall, but can you build a ladder, right? Can you build a staircase to kind of get around those things and not giving up? So I think in that job and those years, I really was able to kind of tap into like my grit and I would say perseverance. And I think it's helped me today, like the strategy piece of that, right? I think is really valuable.
Yeah, yeah, because now you're working, so that work introduced you to a ton of law firms. Now,
Absolutely, yeah.
yes, and now you're working with law firms and other firms. I always, of course, pick up on the law firm part of it because that's
Yeah.
my world. And you're working with them. So how? I would imagine rather that everything that you learned and looking at problems from different angles has informed and looking at problems from different angles with regard to law firms has really informed the work that you're doing now.
Absolutely.
So tell me about that. Like, do you ever, do you ever pull out any of your war stories for your current clients from back then?
Uh, yeah, and sometimes I'm like, oh gosh, this reminds me of a certain situation. And yeah, obviously I have to kind of taper that sometimes. But yeah, I mean, kind of what really intrigued me about the legal industry is how brilliant attorneys are, and how smart they are in their craft. And then when you kind of translate that into a business, right? Um, it's really difficult because you have somebody who has an education in one thing, they are very, very skilled, and then at the same time, take for instance, like a managing partner, they have to wear a completely different hat, right, from what their training, education, and I would say day job is, right?
Yeah.
And so that's really where I really developed a tremendous amount of respect for attorneys and what they do, especially in running a business, right?
Yeah.
Um, and yes, obviously, not every single attorney is skilled in that regard. But I think the legal industry overall is just very fascinating from that perspective. And so, yeah, I think that lawyers tend to want to run their business in a very traditional manner, right? And I think that to your point in like war stories, sometimes you can see them making the same mistakes, right? And that's where a lot of times I'm like, oh no, oh no, I've seen this playbook before. Let's have a conversation, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think those years that I spent really diving in has helped me tremendously with my clients in terms of helping them with examples, helping them to navigate sometimes away from what I call sometimes landmines, right? In terms of like, hey, have you ever heard of XYZ law firm? Because they were on, they made the headlines and not for great reasons. And I think this kind of correlates down that path. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. And I would imagine also that, speaking of people wearing different hats, you do have law firm leaders who come up through the practice of law. So they're doing one thing. This is their profession. This is what they were
Yeah,
trained to do.
yeah.
And they are moved into sometimes they don't ask for it. Sometimes it's just, it happens, even if they might not want it. And they're moved into a position of management. So you also, in your career, you came up through this very corporate environment, and now
Yeah.
you're working for yourself. So it's a
Yeah.
different kind of thing. So, does your own experience with making a transition in your career from one environment to another help you as you speak with some of those law firm leaders who have had to do the same thing?
Absolutely. Yes. And it's funny, yeah, because from going to banking to inside a law firm to then being a consultant, they're three very, very different
Yes.
things, right? And what I'll say is, so kind of going back a little bit from my transition from banking to the law firm sector, um, I had to change some things about myself from that perspective. I was getting the feedback of your great ideas, you're very formal, very corporate. And so by the third time I got that feedback, I was like, okay, I need to change my approach here. And yeah, in the banking world that I had come from, it was very, very traditional. Committees managed everything, the board, shareholders. So I had to really kind of evaluate that. And then as I went from the legal sector to a consultant, a lot of my behavior had to change too. And what's funny, Erica, is that to be an effective consultant, I actually kind of tapped into what a lot of really successful attorneys do. So it was kind of a little bit of a different approach there because I kind of had to go back to some of the really good attorneys that I developed relationships with and that were very, very successful. And I really tapped into tracking my time, being very, very focused, time blocking, things of that nature. So to answer your question with a little bit of a deviation is I've learned a ton from my clients from that perspective,
Yeah.
right? But then, yes, in correlation to that, I think that there's a lot that my clients have learned from me and vice versa. But, and I'm sorry, I forgot what the question.
Talking about like, how, the transition that you made from
Oh,
working in a corporate environment to working for yourself has helped you working with lawyers, especially firm management, who sometimes do have to put on a different hat that they're not comfortable with.
yes.
I love that you've learned so much from them too.
Yes. Yeah. And that's where, when, a lot of my clients, I kind of talk about helping them separate the practice of law and then the business of law, right? And trying to bucket things, because I think that that helps them a little bit in terms of like, okay, this is my practice of law and that's these things.
Yeah.
And then I have the business of law, and that's these things, right? And once you can kind of segregate those things out a little bit, and not kind of jumble them together, I think it helps from that perspective, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And one thing I did learn, and this is even more so now as a consultant, but I kind of learned it when I entered into the legal environment, and it was very different for me, is that lawyers are very skeptical by nature, and that's because of their education and their trade, right? And so what I had to learn in the first, 6 months of working inside of a law firm is that they're not questioning you specifically. They're just questioning the process, right?
Yeah.
And so that was a very different thing. And even now, I really very much try in my consulting practice to kind of get ahead of that and to answer those questions ahead of time so that we don't have to kind of go head to head with that piece. But I think that any professional who's going from a different industry to the legal sector, I think that can become a little bit of a challenge, right?
Oh, yeah.
Is that lawyers are questioning things because that's what they do and that's what they're really good at, but they're not questioning you and your specific abilities.
Yeah.
So that was just one thing that was really profound to me. And then as a consultant, I really had to kind of hone into that piece of it.
Yeah, I had to focus on that as well and really work through that for the
Mhm.
same reason, because like
Yeah.
so many people in this world, I've dealt with imposter syndrome a lot. So then somebody
Yeah.
would question and I would take it as, oh my goodness, that maybe I don't know what I'm doing. They're questioning my ability. But you're
Yes.
right, it took me a while to learn. No, it's not my ability. They're
Yeah.
asking, but this is literally what they've been trained to do. They're doing
Right.
what they've been trained to do. They're questioning the situation at hand because they want to fully understand it. And I'm the expert here who can help them understand it. So I'm in
Exactly.
a position, I changed the calculus of it for myself and
Yeah.
turned it into this is an opportunity for me to help.
Yes.
And that changed the whole feeling of it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And to your point, yeah, if you can kind of take the initiative to educate first, and then kind of go, a lot of times, a lot of those additional questions are then alleviated because then they fully understand it, right?
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now I welcome questions because it
Yeah.
shows, to me, it shows the person who I'm working with is interested and they're engaged.
Yes.
They're asking questions like this, it means they're interested and they're engaged. I would much rather have that than work with somebody who is not focused on it, where the work at hand isn't really that important to them. So
Right.
I welcome it now.
Yeah. I know. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. So, what was with your career path, especially when you were, struck out on your own? What
Yeah.
was this, or if there was there a scariest part of it for you?
Yeah. I mean, all of it, right?
That's great. Everything.
Everything. I mean, specifically, right? If you are going from an employee to a consultant or
Yeah.
owning your own business in any way, shape, or form, you go from a paycheck to not,
Yeah.
right? So that piece obviously is very scary. Just all of the unknowns, right? That come your way, that's all scary. And I'll tell you the funniest piece about it is, so I embarked on this journey to start a consulting firm, be a consultant, and I think I was a consultant for, let's see, 6, 7, 8 months, and I found out I was pregnant with twins.
I didn't realize it was that soon after.
No, very soon after. And it was like, oh gosh, okay. Now how am I going to do all of this, right? So I think honestly, that was probably the scariest part for me, was that specific piece of it. And it was amazing, obviously. But at that point in time, I was like, wow, did I make a big mistake here? And how am I going to get through this?
And now, here you are, about 4 years later, 3.5, 4 years later, and you
Yeah,
have toddlers.
yeah, yeah,
But you can structure your day and your schedule in a way that works for you. So you can make the business work for you
yeah.
in a way that you can't when you're on somebody else's schedule.
Absolutely. And I think that's been the most incredible part of this journey is the consulting, the flexibility that it affords our family, right? And the time that I do get to spend with my kids. I'm so thankful. So, yeah, fast forward, it was the best decision I ever made, and it was amazing, even though it was a little scary at the time.
Yeah.
So,
I understand that. I mean, now for me, my kids now are coming to the end of high school, so I'm in a different place with that. But I also have my mother is older, and she needs more help. So when I think about my day now, I don't think I could go in-house again. I mean, obviously I could if I had to, but I would
right.
not choose to because the way that I need to structure my day to, have time for both my kids and for my mother
Yeah.
is just I would be on FMLA all the time.
Right, right, exactly. And that's I think the beauty of this whole fractional world, right?
Yeah.
And I think the connectivity now in being virtual versus being mandated, to be in an office 40, 50 hours a week, all of that, right?
Yeah. 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 So was there a setback that you encountered at any point that actually turned out to be an opportunity that you can recall?
Um, yeah, I mean, looking back in my career, so many. But um, I think looking back to like the consulting piece, right?
Yeah.
Um, I think the twins were, oh gosh, I think they were 4 months at the time. And I lost one of my biggest clients at that point in time, and not for performance, not they were just going through some internal issues.
Mhm.
And they made the decision at that point to really kind of reel everything in. They got rid of all contractors, all consultants. That was kind of step one. And so I obviously got the axe with that, right? And I thought, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do here? The kids are so little. It's really hard to network. And so I was just trying to navigate that piece of it. Well, I think it was 6, 7 months. They were 6, 7 months old, and then I found out I was pregnant with my third, which I mean, Erica, it was like absolutely like unexpected because we struggled with my twin. It was like, oh my goodness. And in that time frame, I had kind of settled with growing for one of my other existing clients, which they were phenomenal. It was 100% women owned law firm. And I think had I still had that other client in place, I would have never been able to expand that relationship, right? Um, and at that point in time, it was exactly what I needed, and I was exactly in the right place. They were so supportive. Obviously both of them had kids, understood, kind of everything that I was going through. Um, so it was a setback of, I would call it probably a failure, right, to lose a massive client like that. But ultimately, it ended up being the best thing that I needed, right? And then I had so many complications with my son, and they were so graceful in terms of, when I needed to block off my calendar and wouldn't be available. So I think that was an amazing opportunity that I would have never expanded had I still had that other client in place,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. I've certainly, um, I have now taken the approach or the mindset really that like, I don't know, I'm done assuming that something is good or something is bad because I just don't know. Sometimes I
Yeah,
look at something and it seems like it's absolutely terrible. And then I realize, oh, that was a gift.
exactly. Yes.
Either because I dodged a bullet or I learned something, it turned into an opportunity. I've had things turn into where, I take a networking call and it turns into a fantastic client who I love working with. And I never expected it.
No, and that's exactly it, Erica. And then, there's been others where, to your point, like dodging a bullet, right? I've had other opportunities that I thought, oh, this is amazing. I want this client. This is going to be, yes, it's perfect timing. And then for one reason or another, maybe they chose somebody else or something else happened. And then, for example, one that I can think of, months and months after, I didn't get awarded the contract, a headline came out that was really terrible. And I was like, oh my gosh, that would have been terrible if I had been involved in that.
Yeah.
Right. And things like that, I think happen. Yeah. And so even with that, like I've kind of taken the approach of, my career and your life is kind of like a winding path, and you kind of navigate through it as best you can. And I think in some cases we dodge some bullets, and in the moment it seems kind of devastating and not great, but then everything it does come full circle,
Yeah.
right?
I had one early on, a client. I really wanted it. It was early on when I had started my business. And I thought I put my best foot forward, and then it went to somebody else. And I knew the
Oh,
person who won the work.
yeah.
And at first I was so upset. I was happy for this other person. And I was upset for myself. And then over time, she would call me every now and then. She didn't realize that I had gone for it also. She would call me every now and then and say, just talk about it. And she said, oh, this client is such a pain. They're such a pain. I can't stand it. And I would sit there and we would work. I would, work through some of the issues with her, work through some of the problems or the challenges that she was facing. And each
Mhm.
time I would hang up and be like, oh my goodness, thank God.
Yeah. You're like, okay.
I can be in a position of helping her work through it. And then it's like, giving the grandchild back and be like, here you go.
Exactly. Yes.
Oh my
Oh gosh.
goodness. So now you've come through really a lot of different phases of your career.
Yeah.
If you could go back and change one decision, would you? Or what would it be?
And I think about that a lot. I don't know that I would necessarily change really anything to this point. Um, if I got the opportunity, not to use a golf term, but to have a mulligan, right? Um, I do secretly love taxes. I know it's a very weird thing.
That's very that's very odd.
I know, and
But
my
somebody
husband,
has to, so I'm glad it's you.
I know, and my career path never took that actual path. And so it was always a little bit of a, oh, I wonder what would have happened. Because I love reading like the IRS updates. I love all of it's just very strange. And so I do, and now knowing the legal aspect of it,
Yeah,
if I got a mulligan, I would go back and I would be a tax lawyer. And I know that's very strange.
it is.
Um, yeah, and so I don't think I would go back and change anything because everything I think has worked out and I've had an amazing career and obviously many, many years still to come. But if there could be an alternate universe life, if you will, that would be very interesting to see how those cards would fall.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And you know what? There's
Yeah.
still time. You can always go to law school.
That's what actually somebody just said that to me the other day because we were literally talking about this exact thing. And I was like, yeah, maybe like when my kids go to college, I'll they go to college, I'll go to law school and we'll do that.
Well, as I always say, we'll see, we'll see. But I appreciate your overall perspective on that because somebody asked me that recently, and I said, you know what? There have certainly been some tough lessons that I've learned. When I first struck out on my own, a dear friend of mine who has her own business, hugely successful, more than 10 years now for her.
Mhm.
She said, you're gonna get like your pricing wrong. You're gonna be leaving money on the table, and that's gonna happen for the first several years,
Yeah.
and you just have to be at peace with it.
Yeah.
And then so I found myself thinking, would I go back and change those things? And I mean, maybe, yeah, but I feel like with each mistake that I made, I
Yeah.
learned so much. And most of what I learned really is about myself, and what I'm comfortable with, my own growth. So I
Yeah.
don't know. I'm with you. Like, I don't know that I would go back and really change anything because I've learned so much about myself in this process of being a business owner and an entrepreneur that
Yeah.
I wouldn't trade that. That's been the real,
Yeah.
super wonderful part.
And I agree with that. And even, I think back to even some of the career decisions. So like me taking that crazy risk on myself and building out an audit program, um, it was a few months into that, well, probably 6, 7 months into that, where I then met my husband, right? So you think about, okay, if that career piece didn't unfold that way, I might have never met my husband, right?
Yeah.
So there's even little things like that that are so intertwined. And yeah, Erica, I agree. I mean, I think, uh, yeah, there are so many lessons learned along the way. And one of my mentors said this to me. Um, it was probably at least 10 years ago now. And they said to me, if you don't ever look back on a conversation, on a situation, a decision that you made, and you don't cringe about some of those things, then there's either two things. Either one, you're not reflecting and you're not growing. Or
Mhm.
number two, you're a narcissist.
I've
And I
definitely done a lot of cringing and looking back.
and even
Like,
at that, yeah, this was like 10 years ago when that was
sometimes even just the last week.
right. And I was like, that happens all the time. Where I was like,
Yeah,
oh God, why did you say that? Or you should have used a different word, or you should have presented this differently, or why did you make that decision? So I think that's very profound. And I think about that quite a lot. And especially when I start to criticize myself or cringe about something, I think the key there is what are you learning from that? Right.
yeah,
And the next time that comes around, are you going to do it better? And to your point, the pricing, you learn from that, right? And you evolve, and your business is better for it, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So now you have three kids, what, are they under the age of three or are they all under the age of four? I don't know how.
Well, technically, they're all under the age of 2.5 right now.
Oh my
So,
God. Oh, that's right. 6, 7 months. Yep.
yeah, I know.
So you have your business, you
Mhm.
have things that you do, the mentoring that you do, your big brother, big sister work.
Yeah.
So you're doing a lot. Like, what have you learned also about your own resilience and how you manage your own stress and time?
Sure. I will not lie to you. Most days are a chaotic zoo in my household. Because on top of that, we also have two dogs and a cat. Why not
Just to keep things interesting.
yeah,
So you and your husband are outnumbered by the kids and the animals.
yes, yes, exactly. Yeah, we often say we don't have man-to-man coverage anymore. So,
No,
uh,
no.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really learning what's important to you, and focusing on those things. So a lot of times I hear people say work-life balance. I hate that term because that's assuming that things are actually ever going to be in balance, and they're
Yeah.
not, right? And so I think it's work-life integration,
Mhm.
and finding those things about your career that are very important to you, and the things in your personal life that are very important, and integrating them and figuring that out,
Yeah.
right? Certainly haven't figured it out. I'll let you know one day when I do.
Yeah.
But my husband and I also, we work very much as a team, right? Lots of transparent, open communication. And so I think that that's really important. That's a very important piece of the equation, right? But honestly, for me, I try to really organize my week ahead, time block things, and you're just never going to get time to do everything that you want to do. Um, but you sometimes just have to be okay with that, right? And it's, did I get to the really, really important things? Yes. All of my clients are taken care of. The nonprofit work that I'm doing, that's taken care of. My kids are happy, they're fed, they're healthy. Okay, we're good.
Yeah.
You
Most
know,
important
and it's not
activity.
perfect, right? But it's good enough.
So now we're, believe it or not, we're already coming to the end of the half hour, but I have to ask this
Yeah,
question.
yeah.
If you could sit down with your younger self early in your career, or however far back you want to go, what's the one piece of advice that you would give to that younger version of you?
Yeah, that's a great question, Erica. There's many, many things that I could really think of, but I think the one thing, truthfully, is I would tell my younger self to be much kinder to myself, and to give myself a lot more grace. I think looking back, and anytime something didn't quite go according to plan, or I didn't get the result that I wanted, I was really, really critical of myself, right? And I think truthfully, I could have been a little bit kinder to myself. Um, and that would be one thing. And I would just say to that younger self, like, you're going to have an amazing career and amazing life. And the cards are going to fall in a really great place. So don't stress out so much about it.
I always find, so now I do that exercise. And then I also, when I really need, when I'm starting to get nervous, I try to visit my older self, like myself, 30 years into the future. And I
Yeah,
ask, what would, like, tell me what's going on, and
yeah,
just give me some reassurance. And I always hear the same message each time. It's like, you're right where you're supposed to be. I
yeah,
can see all these things unfolding for you. And I'm so excited for you, for everything that is about to happen.
yeah,
And just let it unfold. Let it
yeah.
unfold.
No, and I love that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that, Erica.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that we got to continue this. Thank you for being one of the early guests on my podcast. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, Erica.
I
I was
told
honored that you invited me, and thought of me for this. So thank you.
well, I've been telling everybody, everyone who I have on for this first part, I
Yeah,
want to invite back, year two, because
yeah,
I feel
I
like,
love
one thing I have learned is I'm not waiting for things to be perfect. I was like, you know what? I've been thinking about
that.
this for a while, and it is time. I'm going to do it. I don't care if it's perfect or not. So
Yeah,
I want to invite everybody back for a second bite at that apple.
love it.
I don't know what
Yeah,
better is going to look like, and maybe it'll just be like, no, this is the way it's meant to be, and this is fantastic. This is, this is where it is.
I love
It's
it.
just thing. But I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Erica.
And thank you, everybody who has been watching. If you have enjoyed this episode, please share it with others, and I hope that we'll see you again. Have a great day.